Have you ever picked up a passenger who seemed perfectly normal until you noticed small details that didn't add up? Have you ever driven someone to a cemetery and realized halfway through the trip that they might be visiting their own grave? What would you do if your passenger started talking about events from decades ago as if they happened yesterday, and you discovered later that they died before you were even born? And when does a simple rideshare become a journey between the living and the dead? My name is Melissa Torres, and I've been driving for Uber in Denver, Colorado for 5 years. 5 years of early mornings and late nights, of tourist pickups from the airport, of drunk college kids from downtown bars, of the steady stream of humanity that needs to get from point A to point B. I thought I'd seen every type of passenger, every kind of strange request, every variation of human behavior that unfolds in the back seat of a Honda Accord. But nothing in 5 years of driving prepared me for the ride I gave on the morning of November 2nd. Nothing prepared me for Daniel Reeves, who requested a trip to Riverside Cemetery to visit a grave that turned out to be his own. Denver in early November has this quality of being caught between seasons. The trees are mostly bare, the mountains in the distance already show snow on their peaks, but the days can still be mild and pleasant. I'd started my Saturday shift at 6 a.m., hoping to catch airport runs and breakfast crowds before the weekend traffic got too heavy. The first few rides were routine, a nurse heading home from a night shift at St. Joseph's, a businessman catching an early flight to Phoenix, a young couple leaving a hotel downtown after what was clearly a night they wanted to forget. At 8:15, I got a ping for a pickup in the Highlands neighborhood. The passenger name showed as Daniel R. On 4.8 stars, no photo. Pickup location was a residential address on West 32nd Avenue, destination listed as Riverside Cemetery on Brighton Boulevard. The trip estimate showed about 20 minutes, $15. Nothing unusual about a cemetery trip. I'd driven people to visit graves plenty of times, especially around holidays. All Souls Day had just passed. People visit their dead this time of year. I pulled up to the address, a modest brick bungalow probably built in the 20s. Well-maintained, small front yard with a few struggling autumn plants, porch lights still on in the morning dimness. I sent the standard text, "Your Uber is here," and waited. A minute passed. 2 minutes. I was about to send another text when the front door opened. The man who emerged looked to be in his early 60s, maybe late 50s. Average height, thin build, wearing slacks and a button-down shirt under a light jacket. Gray hair neatly combed, clean-shaven, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who's mindful of their body but not infirm. He carried a small bouquet of flowers, white roses I noticed as he approached the car. His face had a quality I couldn't quite place. Sad but peaceful, like someone who'd made their peace with grief. "Melissa?" he asked as he reached for the back door. "That's me." "Daniel?" "Yes. Thank you for coming." He slid into the back seat carefully, the flowers resting on his lap. "Riverside Cemetery, please. The older section, near the river." "You got it." I confirmed the destination in the app and pulled away from the curb. The morning streets were quiet, just starting to fill with weekend traffic. Daniel settled into his seat, looking out the window with an expression of deep contemplation. I've learned to read passengers. Some want conversation, some want silence. Daniel seemed like he wanted quiet, so I didn't push. But as we drove, small details started catching my attention. Little things that didn't quite fit together. First was his clothing. The slacks and shirt looked vintage, not in a trendy way, but in an authentically old way. The cut was dated. The fabric had that worn quality of garments that have been washed hundreds of times. His shoes were leather Oxfords, well-maintained but styled in a way I associated with my grandfather's generation. Then there was his smell, or rather the lack of it. Most passengers carry scent with them. Cologne, perfume, shampoo, cigarette smoke, coffee breath, something. Daniel had no smell at all. Not the neutral smell of someone who'd just showered, but complete absence of odor, like he wasn't physically there enough to displace air molecules. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. He was still looking out the window, watching the city pass. "First time visiting?" I asked, trying to make casual conversation. "No," he said quietly. "I used to come here often, but it's been a while. Things have changed so much." "Yeah, Denver's grown like crazy the past few years. I've only been here 5 years, but even I've noticed." 5 years, he repeated, and something in his tone was strange. Wistful. "That's not very long at all." We turned onto Brighton Boulevard, heading northeast toward the cemetery. The industrial area was quiet this early on a Saturday. Warehouses, auto shops, the occasional homeless encampment under overpasses. Daniel kept watching everything like he was seeing it for the first time. "The last time I came this way," he said suddenly, "none of this was here. This whole area was different. There was a drive-in theater right about here." He gestured out the window at a storage facility. "The Mile High Drive-In. Saw dozens of movies there with my wife. They had the best popcorn." I smiled politely. "Before my time, I'm afraid." "When did it close?" 1978. They tore it down and built warehouses. Said it wasn't profitable anymore. Barbara cried when we drove past and saw it was gone. She loved that place." Something about the way he said it, so specific, so immediate, like it had just happened, made me uncomfortable. I did quick math. If the drive-in closed in 1978, that was 46 years ago. Daniel would have been a teenager at most. But he'd said my wife, present tense, and the memory had that quality of something recent, something that still hurt. "Do you come to the cemetery often?" I asked, trying to redirect the conversation. "Not as often as I should. It's difficult, you know. Seeing the name on the stone, acknowledging that's all that's left of a whole life. Barbara's been there since 1995, almost 30 years now. I keep thinking I should visit more, but time gets away from you. I'm sorry for your loss, that must be hard." Hard doesn't begin to cover it. We were married 43 years when she passed. High school sweethearts. Can you imagine spending that much time with one person and then they're just gone? The math was nagging at me. If they'd been married 43 years when she died in 1995, they'd married in 1952, which would make Daniel at least 90 years old now, probably older. But the man in my back seat looked 60 at most. Good genes, maybe. Or I was calculating wrong. We were approaching the cemetery entrance, a modest gate set in an old stone wall, the grounds stretching back toward the South Platte River. Riverside Cemetery is one of Denver's oldest burial grounds, established in the 1870s. Lots of historic graves, pioneer families, people who'd built the city when it was just a frontier town. The grounds were well maintained, but had that quality old cemeteries develop, where nature is slowly reclaiming the space no matter how hard maintenance crews work. The older section, Daniel reminded me, near the river. You can pull in and drive back, the roads are paved. I turned into the entrance and followed the narrow road deeper into the cemetery. Early morning fog still clung to the low areas, giving everything a dreamlike quality. Headstones stretched in all directions, varying in size and style depending on their era. Daniel leaned forward, peering through the windshield, obviously looking for something specific. "There," he said, pointing. "That section on the left. You can park anywhere along here." I pulled over near a cluster of older graves, some of the stones weathered and tilted with age. Daniel sat for a moment, his hands resting on the flowers in his lap, seeming to gather himself. Then he spoke without looking at me. "Do you believe in unfinished business, Melissa?" The question caught me off guard. "I'm not sure what you mean. When someone dies, do you think there are things that can keep them connected, anchored to a place or person? Things they need to resolve before they can move on?" It was too philosophical a question for 8:30 on a Saturday morning, and something about his tone made my skin prickle. "I think people believe a lot of different things about death. Why do you ask?" "Because I've been trying to understand it for a long time, trying to figure out what keeps me coming back here, year after year, when maybe I should be somewhere else." He opened the door and stepped out before I could respond. stood beside the car for a moment, looking around at the graves like he was orienting himself. Then he started walking, not toward any particular grave that I could see, just deeper into the cemetery. The white roses stood out against his dark jacket, bright in the morning light. I should have driven away, should have marked the trip complete and headed back toward downtown for more pickups. But something held me there. Maybe it was the strangeness of the conversation. Maybe it was the way Daniel had asked about unfinished business with such personal weight. Maybe it was all those small wrong details adding up to a feeling I couldn't shake. I pulled out my phone and Googled Daniel Reeves Denver while I waited. Got hundreds of results. It's a common name. I tried Daniel Reeves Riverside Cemetery. Nothing useful. Then, on impulse, I searched Daniel Reeves Obituary Denver 1995. The result that came up made my blood run cold. It was an obituary from the Denver Post, published November 3, 1995. Daniel Patrick Reeves, age 63, passed away peacefully on November 2nd, surrounded by family. Survived by his wife Barbara of 43 years, his children Michael and Jennifer, and 5 grandchildren. Services to be held at Riverside Cemetery. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to the American Heart Association. The article included a photo. Even in the grainy scan of a decades-old newspaper, I recognized him. Same face, same build, same careful way of holding himself. The man in that photo was the man who'd just gotten out of my car carrying white roses. My hand started shaking. This wasn't possible. I'd just driven a dead man, had a conversation with him about his wife's death, about drive-in theaters, about unfinished business. He'd touched my car door, sat in my back seat, spoken in a clear, present voice. Dead people don't request Uber rides. Dead people don't have opinions about how much Denver has changed. Dead people don't ask philosophical questions about what keeps them anchored to the world. But the alternative, that this was all some elaborate prank, or a different Daniel Reeves, or a huge coincidence, felt even less plausible. I knew, with the certainty that bypasses rational thought, that the man walking through Riverside Cemetery was the same man whose obituary I was reading on my phone. I got out of the car, my legs unsteady. The morning air was cold, mist rising from the ground where the sun hadn't yet reached. I could see Daniel about 50 yards away, standing in front of a grave, the white roses still in his hand. I walked toward him, my footsteps loud on the paved path, then quieter as I stepped onto the grass between graves. As I got closer, I could read the headstone he was standing in front of. Daniel Patrick Reeves, 1932-1995. Beloved husband, father, grandfather. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race. Next to it, another stone. Barbara Ann Reeves, 1933-1995. Together again. They'd died the same year. Barbara in September, Daniel in November. 2 months apart after 43 years of marriage. The kind of thing that happens sometimes. One spouse dies and the other follows shortly after, unable or unwilling to live without their partner. Daniel was standing between the 2 graves, looking down at them with an expression of profound sadness. He hadn't placed the flowers yet, just held them while tears ran silently down his face. When he spoke, I realized he'd known I was there the whole time. I died the day after visiting her grave, he said quietly. November 2nd, 1995. Came here just like today. Brought white roses just like these. Stood right here and told Barbara I couldn't do it without her. That the house was too empty, the days too long. I asked her to wait for me, to not go too far. Then I went home and had a massive heart attack in my sleep. The grandkids found me the next morning. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. He was standing right there, solid and present, talking about his own death like he was recounting someone else's story. I thought that would be it, he continued. Death, then Barbara, then whatever comes next. But I never found her. I woke up back at the house, confused, thinking maybe the heart attack had been a dream. But when I tried to talk to the people there, my kids packing up my things, crying, they couldn't hear me, couldn't see me. I was there but not there, a witness to my own funeral, my own absence from the world. He finally placed the roses on Barbara's grave, arranging them carefully. Every year on November 2nd, I wake up at the house. It's different now. Sold twice since my kids let it go, different families living there. But for one day, I'm solid enough to interact with the world. Solid enough to call an Uber, to have a conversation, to visit the graves. Then at sunset, I fade back into whatever in-between place I exist in the rest of the time. "Why?" I whispered. "Why are you stuck here?" Unfinished business, like I asked about. I never said goodbye properly, never told Barbara I was sorry for all the things I did wrong in 43 years of marriage, never told my kids I was proud of them one last time, never got to meet my youngest grandchild, who was born 3 days after I died. I held on to all of that, and it anchored me here. Made me repeat this day over and over, year after year, trying to find a way to let go. He turned to face me fully, and in the morning light I could see what I'd missed before. He was slightly transparent at the edges, like an overexposed photograph. The mist didn't quite disperse around him the way it should have. He cast a shadow, but it was faint, uncertain. "You can see me," he said with wonder. "Really see me. Most years, the driver just takes me here, never suspects anything is wrong, but you noticed. You questioned. Why? I don't know. Small things didn't add up. And then I Googled you." He smiled sadly. "Modern technology. I never thought about that. All these years, and I never considered that someone could just look up my obituary on a phone. Daniel, I need to understand something. Are you really here? Like, are you actually solid enough to have gotten in my car?" "On this day, yes. November 2nd, the anniversary of my death. For maybe 12 hours, I'm physical enough to interact with the world, solid enough to call a ride, to carry flowers, to walk on ground without passing through it. Then I fade back into the half-existence I occupy the rest of the year. What happens the rest of the time? I wander. Not just this cemetery, but the house, the places Barbara and I used to go. The mile-high drive-in, even though it's gone, I can still see it sometimes, overlaid on what's there now. The diner where we had our first date, now a parking garage. The church where we married, torn down in 2003. I exist in multiple times at once, seeing both what is and what was, belonging fully to neither. I sat down on the grass, my legs giving out. This was impossible, was insane. But Daniel stood there, waiting patiently for me to process. And he was real. I could see him, hear him, watch the tears on his face catching the morning light. "How many times have you done this? How many years?" 29. This is my 29th November 2nd since I died. 29 times calling for a ride, visiting these graves, trying to say the things I never said. And every year I fade back without resolution, without finding Barbara, without moving forward, without any change at all. Why can't you find Barbara? She's dead too, right? Wouldn't she be in the same place? She moved on, did whatever you're supposed to do after death. She let go, accepted it, and went. Somewhere else. Somewhere I can't reach because I'm still holding on. Still anchored to this world by regret and unfinished conversations. He knelt beside Barbara's grave, his hand hovering over her name on the stone. His fingers passed through it slightly, like the connection between his consciousness and physical form was tenuous. I love her so much, Melissa. 43 years together, and I still wanted more time. Couldn't accept that our story was over. And that wanting, that refusal to let go, it trapped me here. What do you need? To move on, I mean. What would let you finally go? I don't know. I've tried everything I can think of. Written letters nobody can read. Attended my grandchildren's weddings as an invisible guest. Stood in my children's houses trying to tell them I'm proud of how they've lived without me. Nothing works. I'm stuck in this loop, repeating this day, unable to finish whatever business is keeping me here. A thought occurred to me. Daniel, have you ever tried not coming to the cemetery? On November 2nd, have you ever just stayed away? He looked up at me, surprised. No. It's the only place I can think to go. The only place that feels right. Where else would I be? Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you're so focused on death, the cemetery, the graves, the fact that you and Barbara are dead, that you can't move past it. Maybe unfinished business isn't about visiting graves. Maybe it's about, I don't know, something else entirely. He stood slowly, considering this. What would you suggest? I pulled out my phone, my hand still shaking. You said you have grandchildren. You said there's one you never met, born after you died. Do you know where they are? Do you know anything about them? Sarah, my daughter Jennifer's youngest. She'd be 29 now. Lives somewhere in Denver, I think. I've tried to find her over the years, but I can't seem to locate her when I'm in my in-between state. Only on November the 2nd am I solid enough to interact with the world, and I've always come here. Okay. Work with me here. I was operating on instinct now, on a gut feeling that visiting graves for 29 years obviously wasn't working. What if we try something different? What if instead of saying goodbye to the dead, you try to connect with the living? Your granddaughter, the one you never met. Maybe that's the unfinished business. Not your relationship with Barbara, but the relationships you never got to have with the people who came after you. Daniel stared at me like I'd suggested we fly to the moon. Leave the cemetery on November 2nd? I can't. I have to be here. I have to visit Barbara. Why? What happens if you don't? I don't know. I've never not come. You've been doing the same thing for 29 years and it hasn't worked. Maybe it's time to try something different. I could see the war happening behind his eyes. Decades of routine versus the possibility of change. The comfort of known grief versus the uncertainty of attempting something new. Finally, he looked back at Barbara's grave, spoke to it directly. Barbara, if you can hear me somehow, and I hope you can, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to try to let go, to move forward, to stop holding on to what we had and accept that it's over. I love you. I'll always love you. But maybe it's time for me to stop visiting your grave and start living whatever existence I still have left. He turned back to me, his face set with determination. Find Sarah. Find my granddaughter. Let me meet her just once before this day ends and I fade back. If that doesn't resolve this, if I'm still trapped, well, at least I'll have tried something new. I pulled up Facebook on my phone, searched for Sarah Reeves Denver. Got several results. Do you know what she looks like or what she does for work? She's a teacher, elementary school. Jennifer posts photos sometimes when I've been able to see them. Dark hair, looks like her mother, which means she looks like Barbara too. I scrolled through results until I found a profile that fit. Sarah Reeves works at Columbian Elementary School, lives in Denver. The profile photo showed a woman in her late 20s with dark hair and a warm smile, standing in a classroom decorated with student artwork. This her? Daniel moved closer to look at my phone screen and I felt that weird absence of presence again, like the air near him was colder and emptier than it should be. Yes, that's Sarah. That's my granddaughter. I clicked through to her public posts, looking for anything that might tell us where she'd be on a Saturday morning. Recent post from 2 days ago. Looking forward to my weekly coffee and reading session at the bookstore tomorrow morning. Small traditions keep us sane. Bookstore. Saturday morning. That has to be today. I looked at Daniel. Do you know which bookstore? The tattered cover? That's where Jennifer always loved to go. Maybe Sarah does too. The tattered cover on Colfax Avenue was about 15 minutes away. I checked the time, 9:10 a.m. If Sarah kept to a regular Saturday routine, she might be there now or heading there soon. Get back in the car. We're going to find your granddaughter. Daniel looked back at the cemetery one more time, at the graves that had been the center of his annual ritual for almost 3 decades. Then he climbed into my back seat, and I drove away from Riverside Cemetery for the second time that morning. Except now I was carrying a passenger who was simultaneously sitting behind me and buried in the ground we were leaving. The drive to the tattered cover was quiet. Daniel watched the city pass with that same intensity as before, but now I understood it differently. He was seeing a world that had continued without him, that had changed and evolved while he stayed frozen in his day of death. Buildings had been torn down and rebuilt. Businesses had opened and closed. The drive-in theater he'd loved had become a storage facility. Everything moved forward except him. It's strange, he said softly. being dead but not gone, being aware of time passing but not really experiencing it. 29 years have gone by, but for me, it's been the same day on repeat. I know abstractly that almost 3 decades have passed, but I don't feel older. Don't feel like I've lived through that time. It's like I'm stuck in amber, preserved, unchanging, while everything around me decays and transforms. Is it lonely? Desperately. The worst part isn't being dead, it's being forgotten. My kids have mostly moved on. They visit the grave once a year on my birthday, say a few words, leave flowers, then go back to their lives. My grandchildren never knew me. I'm just a name on a headstone, a face in old photos they might glance at occasionally. The person I was, the life I lived, it's all fading from memory. In another 20 years, I'll be completely forgotten. Just dates on a stone nobody visits. We pulled into the parking lot of the Tattered Cover. The iconic bookstore occupied a beautiful old building, its large windows promising floor-to-ceiling books inside. A few early customers were already browsing. I parked and turned to face Daniel in the back seat. "Are you ready for this, to meet Sarah?" "I don't know. What do I even say?" "Hi, I'm your grandfather who died before you were born, and I've been haunting Denver for 3 decades. Maybe start with something simpler. And Daniel, you need to know. She might not be able to see you. You said most people can't. I don't know why I can, but there's no guarantee she'll have the same ability. Then why are we here? Because maybe she doesn't need to see you. Maybe just being there, being present in her life for a moment, is enough. Maybe the unfinished business isn't about grand conversations or dramatic goodbyes. Maybe it's just about witnessing the people who came from you, acknowledging that your life continued through them even after you died." We got out of the car and entered the bookstore. The smell of coffee and paper hit immediately, comforting, warm, alive in a way the cemetery had not been. A cafe area occupied the front corner, small tables and comfortable chairs scattered around. I scanned the space and found her almost immediately. Sarah Reeves sat at a table by the window, a large coffee cup at her elbow, a book open in front of her. She wore casual weekend clothes, jeans, a sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked completely absorbed in her reading, occasionally making notes in a small notebook beside the book. Peaceful, content, living the small tradition that kept her sane. Daniel stopped in his tracks when he saw her. "That's her. That's Sarah." "Go talk to her," I urged. I can't just walk up to my granddaughter and, "Daniel, you have maybe 8 hours left before you fade back into whatever limbo you exist in. You've spent 29 years visiting graves. Try something different, please." He moved toward her table slowly, like he was approaching something precious and fragile. I followed at a distance, pretending to browse books, but keeping them in my peripheral vision. Daniel stopped beside Sarah's table, looking down at her with an expression of such pure love and longing that it made my chest ache. "Sarah," he said softly. She didn't respond, didn't look up, just kept reading her book, completely unaware of the ghost standing 3 feet away. Daniel tried again, louder. "Sarah, can you hear me?" Nothing. She turned a page, took a sip of coffee, made a note. Daniel looked back at me desperately. I shook my head slightly. I'd warned him this might happen. He couldn't interact with her, couldn't speak to her, couldn't make his presence known. He was invisible to her, just as he'd been invisible to his children at his funeral. Invisible to the countless other people he'd tried to contact over the past 3 decades. But he didn't leave. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, even though she couldn't see him. Just sat there watching her read, studying her face for traces of Barbara, of Jennifer, of himself. After a moment, he started talking, not trying to get her attention, just speaking to her as if she could hear. "You look so much like your grandmother," he said. "Same eyes. Same way of holding your mouth when you're concentrating. Barbara used to read just like you're reading now. Completely absorbed, the whole world fading away. I'd watch her for hours sometimes, just seeing her happy and engrossed in a story." Sarah turned another page, made another note. Had no idea her grandfather was sitting across from her, recounting memories of a woman she'd barely known. Your mother, Jennifer, she used to love bookstores too. I'd bring her here, well, not this exact building, but the old location. Every Saturday when she was young, she'd spend hours in the children's section, stacking up books she wanted to read. We'd leave with armfuls every time. Barbara would get mad at me for spending so much money, but how do you say no to a kid who loves reading? I watched from my spot near the history section, my heart breaking for this man who'd spent 30 years trying to say goodbye to people who couldn't hear him. But something about this felt different from the cemetery visits. At the cemetery, he'd been focused on the past, on what was lost, on death itself. Here, watching Sarah live her life, he was focused on the present, on the continuation of his family, on the fact that his life had meaning beyond his own existence. I wish I'd gotten to meet you, Daniel continued. Wish I'd been able to hold you as a baby, watch you grow up, see the person you became. But you're here, Sarah. You're alive and reading and drinking coffee and living a good life. And that matters. That means Barbara and I did something right. We raised Jennifer, and she raised you, and here you are, making the world a little better just by being a teacher, by loving books, by having traditions that keep you sane. Sarah closed her book and checked her phone, gathered her things, preparing to leave. Daniel stayed seated, watching her with such tenderness that I had to look away. Thank you, he said as she stood up. Thank you for existing. Thank you for being the part of me that gets to keep living. I'm sorry I never got to know you, but I'm so proud of who you are. Sarah walked past him toward the door, passing through the space where he sat without any awareness that he was there. But as she reached the exit, she paused, turned back toward the table where she'd been sitting, a confused expression on her face. She stood there for a moment, seeming to debate something, then pulled out her phone and made a call. Mom? Hi, I know it's early. I had the weirdest feeling. Like Grandpa was here somehow. No, I'm fine. I'm at the bookstore. I just suddenly thought about him, about how he died before I was born and I never got to meet him. Do you think it's possible to miss someone you never knew? She listened to her mother's response, nodded. Yeah, you're right. I should visit his grave sometime, pay my respects. It's been forever since I've been to Riverside. Maybe today, actually. I don't have anything planned. Would you want to come with me? She listened some more, smiled. Okay. I'll pick you up in an hour. Love you too, Mom. She hung up and left the bookstore. Daniel sat frozen at the table, tears streaming down his face. I approached slowly. Did you see that? He whispered. She felt something. She knew somehow that I was here. Or maybe, I said gently. You being here, being present in her life, even for just a few minutes, created a ripple, a connection. And she sensed it, even if she couldn't see you directly. She's going to visit my grave. Sarah's going to visit my grave today because I was here. Yeah, she is. Daniel stood up slowly, looking around the bookstore like he was seeing it for the first time. I've spent 29 years trying to hold on to the past, trying to stay connected to Barbara, to my old life, to the things I lost. But maybe that's not what unfinished business means. Maybe I needed to see that life continued, that I mattered enough that my granddaughter, who never even met me, still carries me with her somehow. I think you're right. He looked at me directly, and I could see he was more transparent than he'd been at the cemetery, fading slightly, like the resolution to his unfinished business was already starting to release him. Thank you, Melissa, for not just dropping me at the cemetery and driving away, for questioning, for investigating, for helping me try something different. I'm glad I could help. Can I ask you something? Why do you think you can see me when most people can't? I'd been wondering the same thing. I don't know. Maybe because I was willing to look. Maybe because I didn't just accept the surface explanation. Or maybe I just happened to be the right person at the right time. My last ride, he said softly. After 29 years of calling for drivers, you're my last ride. I can feel it. Whatever was keeping me here is loosening. I'm going to be able to move on now. Where will you go? I don't know. Wherever Barbara went, hopefully. Wherever people go when they finally let go of the world. But for the first time in 30 years, I'm not afraid of finding out. We walked back to my car together. Daniel was definitely more transparent now, his edges blurring into the morning light. By the time we reached the parking lot, I could see through him slightly, like he was becoming part of the air itself. "I don't think I can get back in the car," he said. "I'm fading too fast." "That's okay, you don't need to. You've done what you needed to do. Will you do me one more favor? Will you tell Sarah's mother, Jennifer, that I was proud of her, that she raised a wonderful daughter? I know she won't believe you, but maybe she'll remember it somehow. Maybe it'll bring her comfort. I promise." Daniel smiled, and for the first time since I'd picked him up, he looked truly at peace. "Goodbye, Melissa. Thank you for being the bridge I needed. Thank you for helping me find my way home. Goodbye, Daniel. I hope you find Barbara." He faded completely then, dissolving into the November morning like morning mist burning off under the sun. One moment he was there, transparent but visible, and the next he was gone. Just empty space where a dead man had been standing, thanking a stranger for helping him let go. I sat in my car for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. I'd driven a ghost to the cemetery, had a philosophical conversation with a man who died before I was born, helped him realize his unfinished business wasn't about visiting graves but about witnessing the life that continued after his death. And then I'd watched him fade into whatever comes next, finally released from the loop that had trapped him for nearly 3 decades. My phone buzzed with a new ride request, an airport run from Capitol Hill. Life continuing, the algorithm matching drivers to passengers, the world moving forward like it always does. I almost declined it, almost went home to process the impossible thing that had just happened. But I accepted instead, put the car in drive, returned to the rhythm of normal Saturday rides. 3 hours later, during a break between passengers, I Googled Daniel Patrick Reeves Denver obituary again. The same article came up, the same photo. But when I looked at the photo this time, something was different. Daniel looked happier somehow, more at peace. Like the image had changed subtly to reflect the fact that he was no longer trapped in an endless loop of grief and regret. Or maybe it had always looked that way, and I'd just been too focused on the wrongness of driving a dead man to really see it. I'll never know for sure. 2 weeks later, I got a message through the Uber app from a passenger I didn't recognize, Jennifer Keller. It said simply, "My daughter and I visited my father's grave last week. While we were there, a woman approached us and said she had a message. That my father wanted me to know he was proud of me, proud of my daughter. She wouldn't explain how she knew this, just said to tell me and then left. I think that woman was you. I don't know how or why, but thank you. It brought me more peace than you can imagine." I never responded. What could I say? That I'd driven her dead father around Denver on the anniversary of his death? That he'd spent nearly 3 decades trapped between worlds trying to say goodbye? Some things are better left as mysteries, as inexplicable moments of grace that we accept without fully understanding. But I kept the message, saved it in a special folder on my phone. Because sometimes when I'm driving late at night and the city feels empty and strange, when I pick up passengers who seem slightly off or disconnected from reality, I remember Daniel Reeves. Remember that not everyone in my back seat is necessarily among the living. Remember that sometimes a simple ride from point A to point B is actually a journey between worlds, a last chance for the trapped to find release. I watch my passengers more carefully now. Notice small details. Question things that don't quite add up, because you never know when you might be driving someone who needs help letting go, who's been stuck in an endless loop of grief and regret, who just needs one person to see them and suggest trying something different. The dead are all around us, I've learned. Some have moved on cleanly, peacefully, into whatever comes next. But others get stuck, anchored by unfinished business, by things they never said, by relationships they never got to have. And sometimes, if you're paying attention, if you're willing to question and investigate and help, you can be the bridge they need. The person who helps them take that final step from the world of the living into the peace of true death. I still drive for Uber, still pick up tourists and business travelers and drunk college kids. But I'm also watching, waiting, ready for the next passenger who seems slightly out of time, who talks about the past like it's present, who needs someone to notice they're not quite solid around the edges. Because Daniel Reeves taught me something important. Death isn't always the end. Sometimes people get stuck in the space between life and death, trapped by their own inability to let go. And sometimes all they need is one person willing to see them, to acknowledge them, to help them realize that unfinished business isn't always what we think it is. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt a presence you couldn't explain, or helped someone let go of something they'd been holding on to too long, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment sharing your own encounters with the impossible, with passengers or people who seemed slightly wrong, with moments when you realized reality was stranger and more permeable than you'd been taught. Maybe you've been the bridge for someone trying to cross from one world to another. Maybe you felt the presence of someone who died but didn't quite leave. Either way, you're not alone. We're all navigating a world where the living and the dead exist closer together than we'd like to admit, where unfinished business can trap someone for decades, where sometimes a simple act of attention and care can free a soul from its prison. Thanks for listening to Daniel's story. Thanks for caring about a man who died in 1995 and spent 30 years trying to figure out how to say goodbye. And if you ever pick up a passenger headed to a cemetery who seems nostalgic for a world that doesn't exist anymore, don't just drop them off and leave. Pay attention. Ask questions. You might be their last chance to finally move on.